There's a lot of reasons why people buy real estate. You've got people who I will call end users. They're the people who are buying a property to live in. They might be first-time buyers, or they could be somebody who's transferring in because of a job. Maybe they are downsizing because they're empty nesters. Maybe they're upsizing because their family is growing. Whatever the reason, they find a house, move into that house, that's their reason to purchase. Then you got the developer. The developer is somebody who's going to change the use of the property, and by changing the use, increase its value and make a profit. Perhaps he's buying raw land, he's going to turn it into a subdivision. Or maybe he's buying an industrial building of some sort, and he's going to turn it into loft apartments. But because of the change he's making, he can sell it for a profit. Then we got the renovator. The renovator is a guy who is buying carefully, buying the right property that's tired. He's improving its looks by making changes to the property, and he's working on the philosophy that he can sell it for more than the cost of acquisition and the cost of fixing it up. In fact, many years ago, I met a man in Montreal, actually Montreal West, nice older subdivision part of Montreal, and he was in the process of renovating a house he'd recently purchased. We got talking, and he told me that he had run his own business for a number of years. He said, I never made any money in my business. So he said, I gave it to one of the employees. He said, at that point, I had $4,000. I used it to buy a property. I did all the work myself, renovated it, sold it, and made a profit. He said, with the profit, I bought another one. He said, now I've got to the point where I don't do any of the work myself. I hire all the contract trades to do it. He said, I'm having a ball. And he said, I've turned that $4,000 into $186,000, had all my own living, and really enjoying what I'm doing. He said, I don't count on a change in the market. I just count on the fact that once it's renovated, it's worth more than the money I put into it. That's a renovator. And then you got a speculator. And the speculator is counting on a change in the market. The speculators come out of the woodwork when prices start going up. We've seen that through the COVID era, where speculators were looking at buying, and often they'd buy condominiums. Even though they didn't carry, they'd rent them out, and they'd count on over a period of time that condominium going up in value. And it might cost them $5,000 or $6,000 in carrying costs, but it might make them $100,000 in lift. And that's what they're counting on. And in fact, the speculators are the quickest ones to move out of the market when property values stop going up. And we've seen that more recently as well. We had one fellow, we had a property listed in St. Catharines, an entry-level property, and the agent from out of town brought an offer, and he said, if this offer is successful, my buyer will have bought 54 properties in St. Catharines. He was a speculator, and when he figures the market topped out, he'll be selling those. He's a day trader. And then you've got the investor, and that's you. And I want you to understand the thinking of the investor is totally different than all the rest. First of all, the investor is not looking at utilizing the property. He's not planning on living in it. He's also not primarily interested in a profit. Eventually he wants to make a profit, but he's not interested in seeing his equity go up. I mean, it's always nice on paper to see the property or properties that you own increase in value, but you're not going to ever sell them, so it's academic unless you're going to refinance them to buy another property. That's not really your main goal. Your main goal is long-term cash flow that you can one day enjoy in retirement. And so you want to buy a property, you want to buy it right, then you want the cash flow to pay down the mortgage, and then the cash flow to carry into retirement. So the question is, when to buy? And I'm a firm believer that there's no bad time to buy. You don't have to time the market, watch the market. In fact, back in the year 1990, I purchased a property in the north end of St. Catharines. I paid top value for it. And very shortly thereafter, in March of 1990, the market hit a brick wall and prices stopped going up, and then they started to settle. And a year later, that property was worth about 15% less than I paid for it. I paid $160, now it was worth $142. Didn't matter. I had it rented out, the rent was carrying the mortgage, nothing really changed. And today it's probably worth north of $700,000. So the fact that I paid $160, I hadn't waited a little bit, bought it for $142, really doesn't enter into it. And that's the way it is with investors. It isn't timing the market, it's finding the right property. It makes a difference if you buy a bad property, although I must admit I've never bought a property I've regretted, although I've not bought properties and regretted it. But find a property that speaks to you, a property that's the right kind of property, the property that you can rent out and get the rent to carry it, the mortgage, and the timing isn't important. The property is important, the opportunity is important, and staying in it for the long haul is important. I want to thank you for joining me in this video. I look forward to talking to you again next week.